Welcome back to the Adventure Paradox podcast. We have a guest with us today who is a doctor. She is a scholar. I'm so excited to give you a formal introduction in just a moment. But first of all, Allison, real talk. Where in the world are you and what are you anticipating in your real world life right now?
Yeah, I'm in Waco, Texas, so central Texas right now, and we are getting ready for an ice storm this weekend. So we're loaded up on soup and toilet paper, and we're ready to hunker down in Texas.
Oh my gosh, girl, it doesn't get any more real than that. And I hadn't registered that it's Waco. I'm pretty sure Waco is the birthplace of the Curves franchise, which I'm quite familiar with, a longtime fan of. But anyways,
Yes,
side
yes.
story there. Oh, that brings me back. That makes me so happy. For those who don't know, we are welcoming Dr. Allison Alford to the stage. She is a communication scholar, speaker, clinical associate professor at Baylor University and author of the forthcoming book, Good Daughtering, the work you've always done, the credit you've never gotten, and how to finally feel like enough. This is coming out in February 2026. Fascinating. And I think we need to start with defining daughtering. We can talk about good daughtering in a moment, but when we started talking before we turned on the mic, I was like, whoa, 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 hang on a second. I'm not like I'm getting this now, but I wasn't getting it a minute ago. Can you please define daughtering? Because this is so fascinating.
Absolutely. Daughtering is what women do in families to show up for the family and keep it going. And often the things that women do are invisible. Their emotional load, their problem solving or managing things or removing speed bumps. And because we have very limited language to talk about what adult daughters do for their extended families, it often goes unnoticed until we're feeling burnt out or overburdened by it.
Fascinating. And thank you so much for giving us language around something I fully identify with. I remember having this experience. There was a thing going on in my family, which I won't get into, where this mediator, a grief mediator, said to me, she said, Kat, I see you carrying every single person's emotional processing on this situation. And for many, many years, I was always the one like, let's do a family reunion, come on. And then I'd take it personally if certain people would show up. And I've done some work on this. And now I'm like, whatever, if you want to come, great. If you don't, I'm still going to celebrate and I'm not going to make it personal and I'm not going to work to the point of burnout or feeling like it somehow creates worth if we're holding it all together. I'm an oldest daughter too, by the way. I wonder if like the birth order plays into your research or how you think about this.
You know, it's so fascinating to hear stories from women because I think I have a sign on my forehead that says "Tell me your story." In addition to over a decade of research, talking to hundreds of women about daughtering, one of the first things that I learned was women are doing a lot. We're very active. We have agency and choice in our family. That's why daughtering is a verb
Yeah.
because it talks about what we're giving from ourselves. But the sort of hidden counterpart to it is even we don't recognize it. We don't give ourselves credit. Our family's not giving us credit. And there's sort of this lore around being a daughter that the daughters are somehow just passive members who are just there in the family. But if you're an adult daughter from your 20s to your 60s, and you're the one being the CEO, managing the experience every holiday, every get together, the phone calls, the photo shoots, the finances. We are the ones who are doing it. We're the ones who are doing a lot of the work to keep our families connected.
So another thing we touched on that I feel like it's important to acknowledge in this moment is this idea of the sandwich generation. And you really calling out, yeah, that's an important thing. That's not exactly what I'm talking about, though. Can you speak to
Yeah.
that for a minute?
Yeah, when we hear the sandwich generation, which is a really great term that helps us locate who we're talking about. With sandwich generation typically means women in the middle of their life who have their own children, but also have aging parents, and then typically a partner, a career. They just have so much going on, and they're sandwiched in the middle of all of these people's needs. And there are a lot of daughters who are in that situation. But when I talk about daughtering, it's really important for us to picture a woman's role as a daughter across her lifespan without including marriage or children.
Mm.
Because when we only think of women in the middle of their life, inconvenienced or burdened or struggling with things that have to do with parenting, then we sort of miss the fact that being a daughter is our fundamental first role, and that there's beauty in it, and it has nothing to do with being maternal. It has nothing to do with mothering. We're not parenting our parent, we're not mothering our mother. We are daughtering, and there's an honor to that role and that ability, and we need to claim it.
Mm. That was such a mic drop, what you just said, because I have never heard that before in the way that you're talking about it. And I think people are going to be so hungry for this work. I mean, I can think of a lot of people I'm like, I gotta make sure I send this to, and, in my audience, I'm like, and other podcasters who are just hungering for this message. And I guess my next follow-up question would be, why is that? Like, why are you the first one? And also, thank you. Like, hats off to you because you're the first one to say, like, hey, it's not the sandwich generation. You're not necessarily a mother. You were a daughter first. That's what I just heard you say. Like, that is so powerful to witness. And why do you think no one else has called this out? Or in your
Yeah.
research, have you seen other inklings of what you're saying in other ways?
Yeah, I think I'm not necessarily the first one to use this word or this term or to be talking about it, but I am maybe the first one to be given the platform to bring it to the wider cultural audience. And part of the reason for that, I think, how did we get here, is that our society's gotten ready for it. We're ready to think of women in powerful ways in a choice-driven society. We're ready to think of women outside of motherhood, outside of maternal bodies, reproductive bodies. And we're ready to notice members of our society who don't participate in marriage or motherhood and elevate their experiences to an equally honorable ground. And I think that's because so many more women are taking a look at ourselves in our rediscovery, in our new adventuring, and saying, what are all the parts of me that
Mm,
deserve to be looked at? And none of them are more precious than the other. And there's this beautiful daughter part that's always been there, and it will always be there until the day you die. You are a daughter. And I want to honor this beautiful piece of me and rediscover my identity in that way. It's very honorable. It's really got a lot of integrity to it, thinking nobody can take this away from me, and it's not based on who I'm currently connected to at the moment.
totally. So good. And speaking of adventuring and choosing to really look at this and all parts of ourselves, your title, Good Daughtering, immediately points to a paradox, which is if there's a good, then there's also a bad and a great and a middle ground and all of the little things, right? Why did you choose to call out daughtering with the title Good Daughtering?
Right. We have in our culture, really, especially for women, a lot of standards, high standards about how we feel we're supposed to behave. And it's not written anywhere, but if we don't sort of do things the way people expect, we're definitely punished, right? If we're not
Mm,
a good enough mom or a good enough wife or a good enough neighbor or a good enough worker. And women are constantly laboring under these expectations, but we're not articulating those expectations. We're not ever really clear where the expectations stop. It always feels like a moving goalpost. And so part of my research was understanding that many women feel not good enough. And yet, when asked, what is good enough, can't answer that either, because it's just slippery slope. And so we get an opportunity in these discussions in this new language to say, well, I'm going to define it, and I'm going to
Mm.
define it for me and for society and for you and my peers. And I'm going to give us all a little break and say, we're already good daughtering once we notice how much we are doing, how much we are giving, and how much it costs us, but the beautiful returns we get from being a member of a family.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like again, the paradox of if there's a good, there's a bad, or like where's the good enough, right? And sometimes I remember this quote, done is good enough. Like at a certain point, it's like, the perfectionism of our culture and the standards and all those things you're talking about. And then at a certain point, it's like, you know what? I got here. Like that, do you know how hard it was to get here? You know what I mean? Just getting here might be it. But I
Yeah,
really,
enoughness is, I think, really such an important concept, and that we need to grab a hold of and know when to tell ourselves we've reached that summit.
mm,
And so there's a concept in the book that I talk about that's borrowed from a psychologist who researched young children and families, and all these parents, these moms were like, I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I'm attentive enough. I didn't get to the baby when they cried in 30 seconds, I need to hold them more. And his name was Winnicott. And he said, all a mother needs to be is a good enough mother. You don't
mm,
have to get to the baby that quickly. You don't have to be happy every time you wake up in the middle of the night and give the little cuddle. You just have to be good enough for the kid to survive. And
mm,
they're really going to take care of themselves. Like this, they're going to be okay. And as daughters, we need to adopt that. We're trying and pushing and expecting to try to be good enough that we're burning ourselves out and then not even finding joy in the journey or in the experience of being a member of a family. And so
mm.
we have to stop doing that to ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I feel like I'm getting a mirroring of the tell me your story. Like, what was your experience as a daughter and your personal awakening where you were like, oh, whoa, that started this
Yeah.
research journey?
I have a wonderful, loving family. And I think that's why I wrote this book for women who probably have a pretty good family. It's not that bad,
Yeah.
We're certainly not over here at like the narcissists, the no contact, the abuse and drugs and, rehab. We're not in that camp. But I also realized that even though TV or movies showed these sort of perfectly complementary, close families, mother, father situation, I didn't actually know anyone like that in my own life.
Mm,
More of us are in that messy middle. We have it
hmm
pretty good to pretty all right, or I like these people, but they annoy me sometimes. And that's kind of where I found myself.
Yeah.
I really love being a member of my family. I love the benefits of if I'm, flat tire on the side of the road or having a meltdown about something that happened at work, there's always somebody to call who will take a few minutes to listen to me. But they're also going to say, suck it up and move on. They're not they're not perfect. And sometimes they annoy me or they frustrate me, or I think, oh, this holiday meal is going to be frustrating. And so I wanted to talk to women like me who overall enjoy being a member of the family, but we just need a little bit more awareness of our role
Mm,
and the job that we're doing so that we can reframe and readjust our mindset. And it will actually help us hold on and hang on to staying in the family instead of disconnecting from a burnout experience.
Can you say more about disconnecting from a burnout experience?
Yeah, I think we're seeing this a lot, that there are women who are exhausting themselves. Maybe it's emotional, where your mom is fighting with the her brother, which is your uncle, and grandma, and so every couple times a week you're on the phone with these people, and your dad is constantly grumpy about politics and the news cycle, and so you're handling that, and then you also feel like I'm the only one planning the holiday get-togethers, and I'm the one bringing the food, and I'm also bringing my kids and giving them access to my parent, and and my siblings all get off the hook because they live farther away or they don't have enough money or they're a boy. And I am doing everything. And a woman reaches such a level of intense burnout that she's so frustrated she's not able to see any of the benefits. She's
Mm,
no longer able to see the beauty. Unlike when you're a mom and you realize it's so frustrating, but I can't walk away. Like this little person literally needs me. We sometimes, as daughters, feel like, well, I think I'll just walk away because I can't fix these people and I can't fix this experience. And it's just so massively overwhelming. I'm going to just pull away completely. And that's where we are hearing about some of these individuals going no contact.
right.
And they find it to maybe be more of a relief to pull away than to stay and to deal with it and go through it. And I sympathize very much with no contact individuals. I think it can be a relief in the short term. But in the long term, it's not really, research shows that we do well when we're a member of a family, when we don't
Mm,
have the loneliness of isolation, when we're not missing the parts of our identity that are about being in community. And as somebody who sees families as the backbone of society, I
hmm.
think it's part of our responsibility to try to keep families intact and try to keep people together so we can support each other over the long haul of a lifespan.
So the no contact piece and the research you did around it, I'm curious if you have any statistics about any of that.
Well, Oprah recently did a really great show about no contact, and I don't have the exact
Yeah.
numbers at hand. But what I found in my research, we did this big research study about 2 years ago, that we started 2 years ago. It's still ongoing, the publication and everything. Is we asked people to self identify on their quality of their relationship. And we kind of wanted these high, closeness, medium, and then very low closeness, like broken relationships. And we wanted to talk to daughters in every category so that we weren't just hearing the highlights or the most charming stories. And what we found was that the number of people who said that they have a very low quality relationship and is much smaller. So it's important. It's a big deal to those people in that situation. It is harming their health and well-being, but it's really not the majority of daughters. The
Mm,
majority of daughters are in the sort of meh to pretty good category. That is probably 85 to 95% of us. And I don't have the exact statistics. Now that said, is it important to look at an issue in our society where 5 to 10% of people want to go no contact with their parent? Yeah, we need to look at that. And there are
mm,
other wonderful trained people looking at that who are not me. I'm trying to talk to the vast majority of us who generally are good with being in a family, but we need it to be a little bit better, a little
mm,
bit easier. We need to reframe our mindset. We need some shifts in a slightly better direction that improve our life, our quality of life, and improve our happiness and our connections.
hmm. I'm curious, like, because I'm very interested about this disconnection piece and
Yeah,
specifically talking a lot about horses being the antidote to our disconnection. That's a whole other thing. Maybe we'll collab on a retreat at some point for good daughters
love
with
that.
horses. But I'm very curious about this world we live in today, where 100 years ago, you probably didn't move that far away from mom and dad. Like you were still in the same community. And now, my parents live in New Mexico. I live in Idaho. My still alive grandmother is out in Chicago. My husband's mom is in Chicago. Like we're far away. And so I'm curious, some of the research you did you look into if you live close by? Because I heard a really fascinating TEDx talk by a brain researcher who talked about how your brain actually changes after motherhood. But she also said statistically, children that are born where grandmothers live nearby, they are healthier, like they come in at a better weight. And usually the mother chooses to have more children. I was like, that's a pretty interesting statistic. But I'm curious, like,
Yeah.
did you research anything about the demographic of like where people are geographically in their relationship, and maybe the ones that you felt like, wow, this would be kind of, this is what we want to see people doing. Like, let's look at these as good examples. And how do they do it if they live far apart? And how do they do it when they live close by?
Yeah, you asked me earlier about birth order. And I think there's a lot of interesting sort of conversation going on right now saying the eldest daughter does the most.
Mm,
And I can resonate with that experience and why women feel like that because there's so many invisible elements. But the research really does show us that the person who does the most for their aging parent is has two qualities. And one, it's the closest child
yeah.
geographically, boy or girl, no matter what the age birth order is. And then the second indicator is who has the money to do that.
Mhm.
So part of what you're talking about with this spreading or this migration is we have a lot more technology that allows us to stay connected without being nearby. And we have, or at least you and I, and maybe some of your audience, an economic mobility that
Mhm.
allows us to move, which isn't true for every economic bracket. But I think it's so valuable to kind of ask ourselves these questions like if I hear about this great story of what's happening with these women or what's happening with these people, try to imagine it in a wide variety of perspectives. Like, why is that happening? And I
Mm,
think, when we have a mother or a grandmother who's willing to stick around each other and they can tolerate each other and put differences aside and hold their tongue and figure out how to be together, the the thing that we're seeing isn't just some idyllic family that just fell into place. We're seeing emotional maturity. We're
mm,
seeing tolerance and tact and politeness. And the only reason those people can give that to each other is because they also have other forms of security throughout their life. So I think, when we notice disconnection among family members, or the groups of families across the nation is so valuable to ask ourselves not what did that person do wrong,
mm.
not what did this family, how did they mess up, and oh my gosh, they must be terrible people, or this child who doesn't want to speak to their parent is you know such a mean person. But to ask ourselves instead, is there a system in place that's really reminding and rewarding adults for staying connected, staying together, taking care of each other, and honoring that? And in my mind, that comes down to having the language to talk about being in an intergenerational family, talking about it with pride, talking about the messy parts. And so my mind always comes back to communication. It's about
Mm.
communicating more by using the right words and not some of the wrong words that take us off on the wrong track of thinking. But that's what I hear when women read this book and when they hear this research is that the language of daughtering doesn't create more conflict in families. It provides relief. It
Yeah.
provides a way to create a new mental opening. And I think
Which,
horses do that.
well, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can talk a lot about horses if you want to talk about horses. Like, of course.
Well, always bring it back to horses.
When do we ride? We ride at dawn. Um, so yeah, I'd love to touch a little bit more on, this internalization of good girl, and then also sort of what your hope is when it comes to releasing these inherited scripts that we have. I heard you say in something that you sent me, you want people to live fuller, self-directed lives. I'd love for you to say more about that because that really resonated. There was an image that came across my feed a couple of years ago, which I have close by and could share. But it's something like it's a mother kind of holding her daughter, sort of a Victorian, sienna print kind of a thing. And it says, I don't have all the codes to heal the generational programming I got in me, but you do, right? And like you're going to be able to do it. And I just love to hear you say, what are you speaking to that you really want to see in terms of this fuller, self-directed life and letting go of some of these inherited scripts?
Yeah. When we think about how women learn to be a daughter or to do daughtering, it is caught rather than taught, right? It's something that in childhood, we're watching our mom, we're watching our aunties, we're watching grandmother, we're watching our friends and their moms and their grandparents. And, when as we get older and we go and it's time to get married, we watch how our friends do the daughtering with the marriage, or it's time to have babies. We see what do our friends do with the delivery room. And so that creates what you're talking about that we call scripts,
Mm.
which is that roles, which are kind of like being a role in a play. It comes with, in some regards, a script that is a cultural message of this is the right way to do this. And that can happen. It's both helpful because I love kind of knowing, like, what should I do here? And our bodies are attuned to that, but it's also a bit of a trap because we get stuck in these scripts as if they're law, as if they're a hard and fast rule. And we keep going towards something that, like, we're trying to get an A plus plus grade from who knows who. And it leads to this chronic guilt and burnout because we're not really disassembling the script and finding out who wrote this and when
Yeah.
was this written and does this apply any longer to my generation and the current world that we live in with the changes that we've undergone. So, you know, um, a part of what makes that such a problem is not recognizing all that daughters are doing and thinking
Mm.
daughtering is only about being face to face with your parent. So constantly women are like, I've got to do more of these visits, or I've got to do more vacations, or I've got to do more gift giving or food cooking or driving. And we're not realizing and giving ourselves credit that even across the country, sending an Instagram funny, calling and asking a question, planning ahead by putting some money aside for the family trip. Those are all instances of daughtering as well that can
Mm.
provide us some relief if we notice them for ourselves. Um, but we have to take a good hard look at these things and then decide, what kind of daughtering do I want to do? And how do I get there with intentionality?
So how do we get there with intentionality?
Yeah, great question. So, in every chapter of my book, there is a quiz or an activity at the end of every chapter. And it starts in the first part of the book, asking you just to think about and notice what it means to be a daughter. In the second part of the book, it goes into what kind of life do I want? And there are these checklists and rubrics. And do I think this is good daughtering, or do I think that is good? Like, does it mean to be a good daughter means um, coming to the family ranch on the special weekends, or
Mm.
does being a good daughter mean calling 4 times a week? What is it? And let me just go ahead and define it, and then I could try to work towards it, but only if I can first define it. And then by the end of the book, there are recommendations and steps for how to set boundaries, how to have conversations, how to start new paradigms and frameworks within your family that are suited to who you are now and not just a re-acceptance of a script or a past behavior.
Wow. That's really powerful. I can't wait to check your book out. We will make sure we put all of the links in the show notes so that people can find your book, they can follow along. But in case somebody's listening to this doing dishes,
Okay, I'm here. It unfroze.
did you hear my
Uh,
question?
yes, I heard your question. So, yeah, I would love for people to connect with me. My Instagram that you can find me at most easily is Daughtering 101. That's my website, my TikTok, my Facebook, my Substack, my Pinterest, my LinkedIn. And I would love for you to grab the book called Good Daughtering. It has a beautiful bright pink cover. And you can find me at some events this spring across the country, introducing the book and talking to people. Talking to women is my favorite thing. So please share your story with me.
Ugh, I love it. Thank you so much, Allison. I hope you make it out to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and we can celebrate you and get on some horses and do some doddering talk. Really, really appreciate your original medicine and bringing this very important topic into the headlines. Like we need more conversations about this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kat. Really appreciate it.
All right. Hats off to you, girl, for this work. And if you all loved this and you can think of some daughters you want to send it to, please send it out, send it now. And yeah, let's raise the collective on this work. All right. Till next time, adventure on.